The restaurant glowed with borrowed warmth, the kind that tried hard to feel permanent. Pine garlands wrapped around dark wooden beams, red ribbons looped through them with practiced cheer, and tiny white lights blinked as if reminding everyone that joy was expected tonight. Outside, snow drifted down in slow, careful flakes, frosting the street in silence. Inside, forks clinked against plates, glasses chimed, and laughter rose and fell like music rehearsed over many Decembers. At the far corner, beneath a wreath that had slipped slightly to one side, sat Eleanor Whitmore. She had chosen the table because it was quiet. Or perhaps because it was hidden. The chair across from her remained empty, its napkin folded neatly, its silverware aligned with unnecessary precision. Eleanor's coat, a soft gray wool that had cost more than most monthly rents, stayed draped over her shoulders. She hadn't bothered to take it off. It felt safer that way, like armor. In front of her sat a cup of tea, steam long since faded. She wrapped her fingers around it occasionally, not to drink, but to feel something warm. Her hands were steady, manicured, bearing a single ring that hadn't left her finger in 40 years. The diamond caught the light every time she shifted, flashing like a reminder she hadn't asked for. Around her, families leaned toward one another, sharing plates, stealing bites, arguing softly over who would pay the bill even though everyone knew the answer. A young couple at the next table whispered secrets and laughed too loudly afterward. Two elderly men clinked glasses and toasted to another year, their voices thick with history. Eleanor watched them without envy. Envy required energy. What she felt was quieter than that. She had owned buildings taller than this restaurant, employed thousands, shaped markets with a single phone call. Her name opened doors, filled seats, commanded attention. Tonight, it did none of those things. Tonight, it was just a name written neatly on a reservation card, placed beside a single setting. She had told herself she wanted this. No fuss. No pity invitations. No forced cheer from people who didn't know her anymore. Christmas Eve alone was a choice, she insisted, and choices were something she had always been good at making. Still, her eyes drifted again to the empty chair. Behind the counter, Maria adjusted her apron and glanced toward the corner for the third time in 10 minutes. She didn't know who Eleanor was, not really. She just knew the woman hadn't touched her food and hadn't once checked her phone. People waiting for someone always check their phones. People who weren't waiting stared into space the way Eleanor did, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Maria picked up a tray and started toward another table, then slowed when she felt a small tug at her sleeve. Mom, she looked down at Lily, who stood beside her with wide eyes and flushed cheeks. Lily's red sweater, knitted by Maria's aunt, slipped off one shoulder. Her curls bounced when she shifted her weight, trying to see past the moving crowd. What is it, sweetheart? Maria asked, lowering her voice. Lily pointed, careful not to be obvious. That grandma, why is she sitting by herself? Maria followed her finger and immediately knew who she meant. The woman in the corner looked different from the others, not sad in an obvious way, not dramatic, just still. Like a painting no one was looking at. Sometimes people like being alone, Maria said, though the words felt thin even as she spoke them. Lily's forehead creased. On Christmas Eve, Maria didn't answer right away. She smoothed Lily's hair, buying herself time. Why don't you color some more? She said, nodding toward the small stack of paper and crayons Lily had been working on at a side table. Lily hesitated, still watching Eleanor. Okay, she said slowly, but her eyes lingered. Eleanor shifted in her chair, sensing the weight of being observed even without seeing who watched her. She reached into her purse, fingers brushing past a leather planner she no longer used and a set of keys that unlocked more doors than she cared to count. She considered paying the bill and leaving before dessert was served. There was dignity in an early exit. Her mind wandered, uninvited, to past Christmas Eves. A long table, too much food, voices overlapping, someone complaining about the turkey being dry. Her husband's laugh, deep and effortless, filling the room. Later years with quieter dinners, then smaller ones, until eventually there had been just two of them. Then one. She lifted her teacup again, took a careful sip, and realized it had gone cold. Across the room, Lily pressed hard with a blue crayon, coloring a star until the paper nearly tore. She folded it clumsily when she was done, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. She slid off her chair and walked back toward her mother. Mom, she said again, holding up the folded paper. Maria glanced down, distracted. In a minute, honey. But, I said in a minute, Maria repeated, sharper than she meant to be. Lily's shoulders drooped, but she didn't argue. She turned instead and looked back at Eleanor's table. The empty chair seemed bigger now, like it was missing something important. Eleanor glanced at her watch. 8:30. The restaurant would be busiest soon. She imagined the noise growing louder, the sense of being alone becoming more obvious. She hated the way her throat tightened at the thought. She placed a few bills on the table, more than enough to cover everything, and slipped her purse strap over her shoulder. As she pushed her chair back, it made a soft sound against the floor that seemed far too loud. That was when a small shadow appeared beside her table. Eleanor looked down, surprised, and saw a little girl standing there, clutching something in her hands. The child's eyes were bright, curious, and completely unafraid. "Excuse me," the girl said, her voice small but steady. "Can I sit with you?" For a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded. Eleanor stared at the child, words suspended somewhere between thought and breath. She felt the old, practiced response rising, polite refusal, gentle smile, boundaries intact. But something held her still. Behind the girl, Maria turned and froze, realization flashing across her face as she hurried forward. Eleanor hadn't noticed her yet. She was still looking at the child, at the empty chair, at the space that had felt so heavy just seconds before. The answer hadn't formed yet, but for the first time that evening, Eleanor didn't feel the urge to stand up and leave. "Excuse me," Lily repeated, her small hands clenched around the folded paper as if it might fly away if she let go. "Can I sit with you?" Eleanor blinked, pulled gently back into the room by the simple courage in the girl's voice. Up close, she could see the faint dusting of freckles across Lily's nose and the way her sweater sleeve slipped over one hand. For a heartbeat, Eleanor considered the rules she had lived by for decades: privacy, distance, control. Then she saw the empty chair again and felt how pointless those rules seemed tonight. "Yes," Eleanor said softly. "I would like that." Lily's face lit up with such immediate joy that Eleanor felt it like a physical warmth. The girl climbed onto the chair opposite her, feet swinging just above the floor, and placed the folded paper carefully between them as if it were something fragile. "I'm Lily," she announced. "My mom works here." "I see," Eleanor said, smiling in a way that surprised her own face. "I'm Eleanor." Lily nodded solemnly, then unfolded the paper. Inside was a star, uneven but bright, colored in blues and golds that spilled beyond the lines. A small heart floated in one corner. "I made it for you," Lily said. "Everyone needs a present on Christmas Eve." Eleanor stared at the star. Her eyes burned before she realized why. She hadn't been given a handmade gift since her grandson was little, before life had scattered her family like leaves in the wind. She reached out and touched the paper with careful fingers, as if it might dissolve. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice unsteady despite her effort. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Lily said, pleased. "Why were you all alone?" Before Eleanor could answer, Maria arrived, breathless and apologetic. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "She just wandered off. I'll take her back to the coloring table." Eleanor looked up at Maria and saw the worry in her eyes, the instinct to protect both her child and a paying guest. Eleanor straightened slightly. "It's all right," she said. "I invited her." Maria hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure." Relief and uncertainty crossed Maria's face at once. "Lily, sweetheart, I'm being good," Lily said earnestly. "We're just talking." Eleanor smiled. "She's excellent company." Maria nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "but I'll be right over there." She gestured toward the counter, then retreated, glancing back more than once. Lily leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So, Eleanor," she said carefully, tasting the name, "who are you having Christmas with?" The question was gentle, unguarded, and impossible to dodge. Eleanor inhaled, then answered honestly. "No one." Lily frowned, processing this information. "Not even tomorrow?" "No," Eleanor said. "Not tomorrow either." Lily thought for a moment, then pushed the star closer to Eleanor. "Well," she said decisively, "now you're with me." Something inside Eleanor cracked open. She laughed, a sound that startled her with its brightness, then pressed her lips together as her eyes filled despite her efforts. "May I keep this?" she asked, lifting the paper star. "Of course," Lily said. "It's yours." Eleanor carefully folded it again and placed it beside her teacup, where it immediately became the most important thing on the table. They talked the way only children and the lonely know how, without pretense. Lily told Eleanor about her school, about how she wanted a dog but her mom said not yet, about how snow made the world feel quieter. Eleanor listened, really listened, nodding and asking questions she hadn't realized she missed asking. Other diners began to notice. Heads turned, smiles softened. A woman at a nearby table wiped her eyes and pretended to adjust her glasses. The restaurant's hum shifted, something tender threading through it. Maria watched from behind the counter, her chest tight. She had spent years working doubles, holidays included, telling herself Lily understood. Seeing her daughter sitting there, so confidently filling a stranger's loneliness, made her throat ache. Eleanor signaled to Maria. "Would you join us?" she asked. "Please." Maria blinked. "Oh, I couldn't. It's Christmas Eve," Eleanor said gently. "And you've been working very hard." The manager, overhearing, gave a small nod. Maria hesitated only a second longer before pulling up a chair. For the first time that night, Eleanor removed her coat. They shared dessert, 3 spoons circling one plate. Lily insisted Eleanor try the chocolate cake first. Maria laughed more than she had all evening. Eleanor told a story about burning cookies once and setting off the fire alarm. And Lily giggled as if it were the funniest thing she'd ever heard. When the bill came, Eleanor paid it quietly, slipping something extra into Maria's hand, not flashy, not performative, just enough to make her breath catch. As they stood to leave, Lily hugged Eleanor without asking, small arms wrapping around her waist. Eleanor closed her eyes and returned the embrace, holding on a moment longer than necessary. "Will you be okay?" Lily asked. Eleanor looked at the paper star in her purse, then at the 2 faces in front of her. "Yes," she said, and for the first time, it was true.